a phenomenal educator and professional in our field. And we also have one of my favorite educators from Shelton State, Miss Joan Wilder. Thank you all for coming to join us tonight on the podcast. So,
Hey.
thank you guys. This is our second episode. So I'm really excited tonight to talk about certification destination. Last week we talked about, well, last month we talked about nonlinear roles and all of the things that a person can do with their degrees in health information. This week we are talking about certifications. I heard somebody say one time, it's good to have letters, but the letters must nourish the soul. That kind of resonated with me because it's like, what we get, what we pursue has to be something that brings value to us in our profession. So, my very first question for each of you is this. What, tell me one fun thing that you learned about yourself while pursuing your certifications? What's one fun thing, not the studying? But what is the fun thing that happened, whether it's before, after, just that came with you getting your certification?
So I'll go.
Okay.
One fun thing that and it may fun is relative because that just may be fun to me. So I'm a caregiver for my mom, and when I take her to her doctor's appointments and talk about my certifications with those health professionals, sometimes it becomes a whole different conversation. So sometimes it's a good conversation where we're talking the language of medicine and healthcare. And then sometimes when I tell them about the compliance certification, they get the big eye, and it's a whole different feel. So that's fun to me because I like to see the reactions of the various professionals that I encounter.
Right. Well, I can just tell you, for me, I have a black belt, Lean Six Sigma black belt. And when I tell people I have a black belt, and they're just like, so is that like Taekwondo, like karate? I'm like, no, not that kind of black belt.
I don't know. You might have a black belt in data.
No. So it's like, no. What it does mean is that I like to cut out the fluff and like to have like productive teams, not so many cooks in the kitchen, and we can move forward like and be efficient and effective. But no, baby, we ain't out here doing the chop suey on nobody. That's not what. That's not that kind of deal. So, yeah, that was my experience. So more funny than fun.
Right.
More funny than fun. What about y'all?
I think mine is similar to Clarice in that, I don't think I share that information up front. However, when I'm having I'm communicating with another healthcare professional on the clinical side, it generally sparks the question, and I'm always excited to share, what do you do? What do you do? So at that point, I'm able to share some of my background, not just my credentials, and all the things I've kind of been able to do with these different credentials over time. So it's pretty much similar.
For me, I think the most unexpected benefit for me, and it's fun, was that honestly, my certifications led me to entrepreneurship. And I would not have ever thought of it without them.
Yeah, that's fun. I've talked to people in the past about how, if you have these certifications, it shows that you're competent in these areas. You can use that as a way to like build a business and build a brand for yourself, especially when it comes to like revenue cycle analytics. If you're helping somebody to see how can we save money, what's keeping us in the red, what's keeping us in the black, what can we get rid of, and what can we add to improve our service line offerings. That's always something that I tell people, hey, consider going into that. And then also, if you have a history or experience in customer service, it's a way for you to put these things together. So always an opportunity there. So want to just talk about again, certification destination. what makes us choose to go the route that we go. So I want to dig into your personal journeys. What made you decide to go this route? I'm gonna start with you, Jesse. What made you decide to pursue these certifications?
To be perfectly honest, so my background is in nursing. I'm an LPN. I've been an LPN for 30 years now, over 30 years. So I got burnt out. And when I got into coding, I had left nursing altogether. I was a barber slash hairdresser. I was like, I'm done.
What?
Yes, I had left altogether, but I just kept my license active, as a plan B. And one of my friends who is an RN used to always tell me that one of her coworkers or former coworkers used to do HEDIS every year. She was like, just apply and somebody will eventually give you a chance. It's hard to get in, but once you get in, you'll be in. And that's what happened. I applied, and this company only hired RNs and LPNs, and they trained us in risk adjustment and HEDIS. And after that, I was hooked.
I love it. I love it. Clarice?
For me, it was specialization. So I got my RHIT. I learned, like most people, learn about the health information profession through through seeing what clinical people do and not wanting to do that. And so then the doors of the business of healthcare opened up, and all of the different things that you can do in, I'm about to date myself, a health information department, because it was a long time ago when I got my RHIT. But I fell in love with medical coding, particularly on the provider side, and decided, let me rise to the top and be above the fray and specialize in this particular area. And that just went from one certification to the next certification, but strategically obtaining those certifications for me.
All right, now, Joan, I know that you, as an educator, before you became an educator, let me tell you something. Joan has been like an icon in the state of Alabama. She was like 12 working in HIM. Many
Wow.
years ago.
15.
Wow.
No, seriously, we were like 14 when you started working in HIM. So she's been working in HIM for a long time. So what made you continue on that path and then choose your certifications to help you get to where you are now?
Well, let's talk about dating ourselves. Um, my first introduction was, we didn't even have these credentials. It was an RRA or RRT at the
I
time.
remember that. Yes.
And at that time, you could only aspire to be an HIM director. Well, that's what I was shooting for. However, it didn't quite fall out that way. I dibbled and dabbled into a little of this, a little of coding, utilization review, so on and so forth. But again, like everybody else, I did not want to be on that clinical side. But I continued it. I continued on these journeys because of the diversity of the profession. With getting your credentials and all the things that I never thought that I would be doing with these particular credentials, such as working for the QIO for the state of Alabama, or doing audits for Blue Cross or Medicare or payers and things like that. So it's just the diversity, and I've tried a little bit of this and tried a little bit of that, and the one constant was my education and my certification.
And so, Marjorie, what about you? Because I know your history of getting into this is a little bit different. So, what made you choose?
So first, it actually started kind of like a requirement. I needed to stand out. I needed to do different things. A lot of people don't know that I've actually worked like the entire life spectrum from birth to death, and have a bunch of different certifications all over the place. Like, for example, I was one of 6 certified Alzheimer train the trainers. So I was certified to train the trainers for Alzheimer's, who then trained others. And it was just about, really understanding what that industry needed and to help fill the gaps with that. And it was so interesting as, working in all these different places that kind of really ignited this passion to understand, like, okay, this is how I stand out. This is how I tell my story about what's interesting to me with my certification. So, can I share my funny little story about like, using that? So I used to put like all my credentials behind my name, and then in one presentation, a person who was introduced to me got confused with all my credentials because she lost track when she looked up at the audience, and she looked down and then she looked at me and she said, "I'm sorry, there's a lot of initials here. I got lost in your alphabet soup." So from then on, I'm like, okay, four. I'm putting 4 on there, depending on my audience. So
Now, I know for me, I chose the ones that I chose because most people know I'm spirit led and data driven. I do the work for the church and then I do the work in the profession, health information. So all of the certifications that I have, I got them so I can use them on both sides. For instance, conflict resolution. I'm a certified conflict manager. People fight in the school, people fight in healthcare, and people definitely fight at the church. So that's why I got that certification. When it came to ProSci, ProSci is about change management. Anytime that you implement new processes, somebody has to be there to help people to adapt to those new changes. In healthcare, in education, and in the church. So whatever I chose, I wanted to choose something that I could use in both places. The work that I do that I did in health information, of course, with implementing new systems, I also helped to implement new programs. Well, the same thing that I did in community organizations, and both of them were based on data collected about people in that community because you have to be able to sustain whatever you're doing. So that's how I ended up doing the certifications related to data and business intelligence and getting these large data sets and making those decisions based on that data. So that was what I I don't have any coding credentials. Okay. I don't have any coding certifications. Don't ask. Don't ask me. Don't ask me. But anything else, absolutely. I love this stuff. And especially when I love data. And so I wanted to get the certifications that I could use on both sides. Whichever one I was doing, I could use them. So it's a great thing about certifications, how it can help you kind of chart your destination and where you're going next. And so, was there a specific moment when you figured out, and I know, Joan, you kind of touched on this, but was there a specific moment when you realized, education is great, but I need these credentials. Like I need these for XYZ. Jesse, I'm gonna start with you. What was the moment when you figured out I need these?
If I can be perfectly honest,
Absolutely.
it was the first election of Donald Trump. And because my job, I had doing the risk adjustment coding, I had gotten on a travel team. We were able to go, we traveled all over the country. And I knew that when he got elected, I knew there was going to be a shift and I was not willing to go everywhere.
Okay.
So I knew I was going to have to get another job.
Mhm.
And I knew that part of being able to get another job was to get my certification because my job did not require a certification. It was just a nursing license. So I knew I had to get a certification to be employable somewhere, or marketable somewhere else. And
Okay.
that was what led to the first one.
Okay. And so what about the subsequent one? Because you got alphabet. So
You know,
what led to the ones after?
what happened was I just started going down a rabbit hole. Like one thing led to another. I'm interested in this. I'm like, okay, well, let me go. And it was just a way for me to challenge myself.
Okay.
But I used them all different in different places for different things.
Right. So what about you, Clarice? When did you decide, being a health information professional, having that very valuable MPH, which I absolutely love, health information professionals with the public health, those two together are a beautiful match. What was the moment when you said, I need these certifications?
So I didn't get the MPH and the RHIA together. So the
Okay.
MPH came more recently.
Okay.
And that's when I saw the beauty of bringing both professions together. Um, I got my RHIT, then I got my RHIA. Well, I take that back. I got my RHIT, then I got my CCSP, I got my CPC, then I went back, got my RHIA, got my compliance certification, and then got my MPH. So I was all over the place. But I realized even with my RHIT, watching Mr. Jesse, we had this conversation all the time. Watching the nurse influx in my profession way back when, to say, you know what, I while they tell us that we are qualified for certain positions, um, the industry is dictating that those positions are quote unquote better suited for someone that they think just has a clinical background. But because they don't know what our clinical background is, we're being overlooked. And from that point, I thought, no, I need to show. It's easy to show versus to say. And so I decided then I needed to make sure I got credentials behind my name to show what I come to the table with.
Well, that's always been, when we get our credentials, do we get it to show competency for the industry, or is it competency like to show the industry? Sometimes I got them because I want to show you I know what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
but what it did was it led to me becoming a letter collector. So I'll just tell you, I'm being honest. The HFMA, CRCR, that Certified Revenue Cycle, I passed it. I don't do nothing with that. I didn't renew it, but I just wanted to show I know my stuff. Now the CSBI, I loved it because business intelligence, that's my thing. But it was just like some of these are because I want to be of value in the industry, but some of it was that part of me that still is that 17-year-old rebellious teenager from Mississippi that was like, don't tell me what I can't do. Let me show you. So when it comes to that, and John, I really want to talk to you about this as an educator and as a seasoned HIM professional. Have you ever dealt with those students that you had to say, hey, what do you want to get these credentials for? Marjorie, you weigh in too, because you were in academics for a long time before coming over here. Do they get those credentials because I want to show the industry, or I want to show the other people, yes, I know how to do this, or is there a combination of both? What is the driving factor to get people to take these certifications? What's been your experience?
Marjorie, do you want to start? Or?
No, go for it, Jim.
Okay, well, for me, it's kind of twofold. For me to get these credentials was more of same as you. I've got to show you what I bring to the table. My story wasn't enough in that in our local healthcare facility, I trained the first utilization review nurses that they had in the facility. So I had to bring something else to the table, and I happened to work in two different places where all of us in the department we're saying this is what we're going to do. So with that being said, as an educator, it's a bit different. It's a bit different to me because I feel like our students at this point want immediate gratification. And they want the job, they want the money, they want it all, and overlooking the fact that you have to get that experience. So it's kind of like I have to show them how marketable you must become in addition to this experience to even get your foot in that door sometimes. To give them, the opportunity to show your peers, your professional peers, not only is this what I can do with this, but here are a few credentials behind my name to support that, along with my education. So And once, when I have one student that succeeds what I do, and I still do this for the students that even began in the program, our first cohort, I share everyone's achievements. And so when those students see the students that have come behind them and they're getting the those credentials unconsciously, I think they're thinking, I want to do the same. Because not only do I share their achievements as far as the credentials are concerned, I share their achievements in the types of jobs they're working in. For example, one of my most recent graduates at the associate's level is now the director of a medical records department at a hospital. And, we see that as only someone with a bachelor's or 10, 15 years of experience gaining those types of opportunities. And that's not necessarily so.
Mm-hmm.
So what about you, Marjorie? Like, how do you encourage the students? And have you seen some students that get it to be marketable and some just to get it to say, let me show you what I can do? Or a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both, and I think it really depends on your program. So similar to what Joan was saying, a lot of those that come in for the RHAT, what I've seen is that they just want the job. They're job hungry, and so they are like, just tell me what you want me to do, and then I'll do that so that I can make this like millions of dollars. I'm like, okay. Let's track that back up, because you're not going to be making millions of dollars because you're starting at entry level. So let's explore that. But then let's explore these pathways that will get you there, and these credentials that are going to create a story of your interest. So like what was already said earlier was amazing, was that you go down this rabbit hole and you get all these credentials, but it shows others your interest. This is cool. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. These are things that really interest me. And I think that when I've seen those in the bachelor's and the master's level, they have a clear set. They kind of know. Now, kind of like what Clarice was talking about. You've gotten all these experiences, but now you need to add to, and you want to show what you can do. You want to show that you're an expert. And now you're ready to like shine the boots and be like, check me out. I'm General, come in here.
That's right. That's right. Because listen, I put my letters behind my name. I think we all do. Jesse, let me tell you. What about you? What is your experience? Because I know you teach your courses. They're not necessarily in an academic program, but you have people that are coming because they're looking for a way to enhance their body of knowledge, get to the field profession. How do you encourage these learners to get these credentials, and how do you push them? Is it like, this is for you to show others what you can do, or this is what you can say, hey, check me out?
I think for my students, because they're like 99.9% nurses, and to be honest, nurses have no clue about HIM. They literally, they come to me, I just want to work from home. or I just want to leave the bedside. That's really it for them. And what do I have to do this? And they have no idea how they can use their clinical skills away from the bedside. So for them, it's an awakening, because it's like they never knew it. So once I show them that, yes, you can do this, but it's also, let me show you what I can do, aside from, read a monitor and give some medicine, then that's when they catch on.
Right. And so, Clarice, you as a leader in your state, a leader in our profession, and with your credentials, how have you been able to encourage people to say, go get your certifications? What is the advice that you give to those people?
Well, I tell them that you want to find your niche. You want to market yourself. But really, you first of all, you need to know what it is you want to do, because I think that starts the path of some of the what we call the squirrel and rabbit holing. if you're undecided and you really don't know, and then you could potentially get to a point where, well, I went this route, but I really don't like this, and so let me try this. And then I looked at this. So you really have to be firm in gaining that knowledge of who am I and what is my passion? What do I want to do? And from there, I always encourage them, don't take no for the answer. Go get the yes. Get the yes by getting your certification. Get the yes by showing them, who you are, and the study that you bring to the table, and all of those things. So I always, I'm pro education.
So what you say? Go get the yes. I'm gonna get that put on a T-shirt.
Go get the yes.
Go get the yes.
I do like, yeah, go get that. Yes.
Yes. That's the second T-shirt idea we've had. Last week we talked about nonlinear roles, and then us working with compliance and working with forensic coding and being expert witness. HR professionals, we keep your tail out of jail. So the
Hey,
T-shirt,
I love that.
go get the yes. I like.
And
We're gonna have a whole collection of T-shirts. So we talked about all the great things about that, and we're definitely going to come back to that. But let's talk about the challenges. What are some of the challenges that you or some of the people that you've dealt with have experienced after they've gotten these certifications and haven't been able to get those jobs? Clarice, I'm gonna come back to you. What are some of those challenges and how you deal with that?
So some of the challenges with people getting their certifications, and I'll speak specifically to coding certifications, is in the way in which they were taught or trained. So they weren't necessarily taught or trained for the skill of coding. They were taught and trained to be successful in passing a certification exam. So when they get hit with one of the many tests that they may have to pass in order to get a particular job or an assessment, and they're unable to pass those assessments, then that's a challenge and that's a problem. And unfortunately, sometimes no one has ever taught them the importance of getting the skill. It's great to get the certification. The certification will come with the skill, but you got to get that skill first. And unfortunately, folks have spent thousands of dollars in programs that really didn't do anything for them, and they suffer. And unfortunately, sometimes they leave the profession altogether because at some point they're tired of taking these certification exams without thinking, well, maybe I need to dig deeper into the skill level and make sure that I appreciate and understand what was actually being taught to me, and then taking that and applying it to then mastering how to take the test versus, how do I take a test and then, oh, I got some skill, let me go and then try to find a job. And I think that's what hurts a lot of people in our profession.
And our profession is skills based.
It's
It's about what you know how to do. And that's one of our upcoming shows. We'll talk about a skills based job hunt. It can't be just based on the letters. It needs to be based on what you know how to do. Project management, data analysis, whatever you know how to do, search by that and not just by those letters behind your name. Those letters behind your name are indicative of your level of competence and expertise in the area, but it's your skills and what you know how to do. Because let's just be honest, I may get it, catch some heat for this, but there are some people that are really good at taking tests, but that does not mean that they necessarily know how to do it.
Oh, and
right?
it gets exposed. It often gets exposed.
Absolutely.
It does.
And
Go ahead.
that's one thing I have to share with my students while they're in my program. And I even have this conversation with them before they even began. If you are an overachiever and your focus is your GPA, this may very well be the wrong program. You will be challenged. I mean, I'm just being honest, because there are some very, very, very good test takers out there. And then, when that grade isn't what they expect it to be, because I'm challenging them and I'm pushing them, they want to do one or two things. Well, they just want to quit. And at that point, it's like, I'm pushing you now as if you would be pushed in the industry. It's not easy out there. And I need to get your thought process past making an A. Learn the skill. the
Right.
jobs, the grades, the jobs, or whatever will come, but you have to learn that skill.
Now, when I graduated with my associate degree to get my RHIT, I was a strong 2.8-ish, I think.
You may want to know my story.
Hey,
You really don't
Like
even want to know my story.
when I went and did my bachelor's degree, it was like a 3.2. My master's degree, it was a 4.0. My doctorate was a 4.0. Why? Because it was just like I was building and I was working while I was doing it. And it was those skills you acquire throughout time that helps you to become even better. But it was not about those grades. It was about me applying what I learned, applying concepts and theories to practice. That's what made it work. So Jesse, I want to ask you about those challenges, because again, you're not in a you're doing those independent courses. What are some of the challenges that your students, your learners experience when they go through your program and after they finish and their expectations? We definitely need to address that.
Oh, honestly, when it comes, I have to do a whole, like, because my first course, the CM course, is 8 weeks. I have to prepare them because nursing is unlike, you can get a job tomorrow as a nurse. Like, nurses don't ever have to work for a job. You just have to be alive and have an active license. That's just a fact. And
Jesse,
they
you're gonna get us in trouble.
and they don't
That's why we
know-
had a T.
and
That's why we had a T.
nurses have no concept of struggle for a job. They have no concept of how to have an appropriate ATS compliant resume. They have no idea what ATS is. I have to explain all of this. I have to tell them that you have to have your resume redone. It has to be in this format. It has to have this on it, or otherwise it's not going to be scanned. So and actually, there's another woman who has an excellent coding program. She shared with me years ago, and I've heard it before. She hates having nurses in her class. And I get it. And I get it.
You see, Joan?
And I get it. And that's why I'm so good with the nurses because I see it, because I know the mindset, because I am one. I know all of the stuff that comes. And it's almost like, seriously, it's like I have to take them through boot camp. I have to break them down and build them back up because they want to fight me, but guess what? We can woo bang all day long. Because guess what? Our licenses come from the same office, chick. Let's have it. But what we're not going to do is debate these guidelines. That's what we not going to do.
That's what we. Yes. You got on your guidelines, sir?
Yeah, not today.
Well, no, but honestly, I think that it's important that we address that because one of the things that is health information professionals, we are highly skilled, and there is that misconception that we are not able to do some of these jobs, that we are able to do some of the jobs that do require clinical skills, especially those of us, I'm gonna tell you, that went to school back in the days where we had 16 weeks to learn that pathoform and medical terminology and everything.
AMP and all of that. Yes.
All of that.
Yes.
We understood that part. And so I really think that, I want for us as HR professionals to help the newer generations that's coming up to be confident in knowing that you can indeed do this work. You can indeed do CDIP.
Absolutely.
Indeed do some of these other roles that have been moved over, especially when it comes to clinical informatics. But you've got to sell yourself. You got to get those skills, and your certifications is just icing on the cake when it comes to that.
May I share one thing?
Yeah,
It was so funny because you and I both work, for our state QIO.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things that I walked in sharing was not only my experience, my credentials, but I had to highlight, the longer I worked there, I had to highlight my experience as far as what I brought to the table from utilization review.
Yeah.
It wasn't until they were in dire need did they think about Joan. So once they brought Joan to the table, Joan became the only coder in the company that could also do the nursing reviewers, the review side.
I remember.
But it wasn't anything. It was out of need, that they heard me, and then I got to exhibit my skills.
Right. And our skills in our health information programs, compliance, that was a part of what we learned. Quality, risk management, performance improvement. All of these things are a part of what we learn in our programs. Right. But when we talk to students now, and I know Joan, Marjorie, Clarice, even you, just all of us, well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to get a job as a coder working from home. But there's so much more that you can do. And I will always express that. Explore other things. Explore all of the things that we can do. Because there was a time when health information did credentialing. I remember that when we were the ones that had to do credentialing for, I remember all of that. Yeah. But now they'll send that out to a third party. But we used to be within the health information department. There's so much that we could do. Back then it was medical records department, but there was a lot that we could do. And I think that it's just really good for us to not only bring it back to the forefront as a part of our expansive skill set, but also encourage people that once you get those skills, getting those certifications can help you chart your path and your professional growth, your professional path. So,
Dr. Jasmine, before we move on, I just want to say this one thing about nurses, because what I did last year was I contacted I was Googling. I contacted every nursing program in the Philadelphia metropolitan area, and there are quite a few. And I just reached out to them to let them know I wanted to come and talk to their students who are about to graduate about how they can use their skills once they get some experience in a new way. And I told them about my background and my transition into HIM medical coding. Not one school wrote me back.
I believe.
And what I thought about it, I was like, that's good, because those same people will be my clients in 2 years. No problem.
Right now. And see how it ages. Because you're probably right. It probably will. So I want you to, for just a minute, put on a different hat. So you are a hiring manager for a job, okay? And you have two candidates. One candidate has lots of experience, one certification. Another one has lots of experience and lots of skills and no certifications. Which one is a better fit? Both of them have a lot of experience. Both of them have a lot of skills. One of them has certifications, the other one does not. Which one is a better fit? How do you determine who's a better fit for your department? Y'all play the Jeopardy music.
Well, okay, I'll take a stab at this one just because, I have been a hiring manager and I did look at that stuff. And so specifically when it comes to having very similar resumes, and one has credentials and one doesn't, one has certifications, one doesn't, what it does for me is that I understand like the rigor and the commitment it takes to attain these credentials. And so it also gives me an opportunity to see more of a holistic view of what the person's interests are. And in some cases, what potential gaps could be filled with that credential person because they've dedicated time, money, life to like earn and display these knowledges. And so, it's kind of like your degree tells you understand the theory of life, but until you actually walk it and earn experience and have the badge of honor that you survived a battle. That's what I'm looking for. Where's your battle scar? Show me your certifications.
Anybody else? I want to hear your input. And there's a reason why I asked that question for sure. Both of them have skills. One has certification, one does not. Who we hiring?
Well, I could, if I could weigh in, I think that it depends. Well, most places now require, like, they go by the credentials someone has, and I can tell you, as somebody who is an LPN in CDI, it is very hard for me to get jobs. Never mind, I have a CDIP. Never mind that I have 2 years experience. I'm not an RN. That's what they go by.
Okay.
So a lot of places go by credentials and not necessarily skill.
Okay.
So let me add a little bit to that, and I'm still going to pose the question for that individual who does not have that credential. My question would be whether they're willing to make the commitment to obtain that credential. And to me, that would be kind of telling as well.
Okay.
I
All
was
right.
thinking the same thing. I was
And-
thinking about the person who didn't and the story behind why they didn't. If they've been in this field and they've gotten this experience and they know this skill, why wouldn't you? And so that would be interesting conversation to me, added to, you know, my decision making on the person with it. Because the person with it could have just said, you know what, they could have been a great test taker with experience and skill.
Right.
But yeah, I would want to have that conversation as well.
Okay. The reason why I ask is, professional credentials is under my purview as well.
Mhm.
When we don't get the numbers, we have fewer students that are taking the test.
Yeah.
Not students that are getting the jobs, because they're getting the jobs,
Mhm.
but there are fewer students taking the test. And what that shows us is that the employers are looking at the skills
Mhm.
and not so much at the certifications. However, for us, we know what it means to have those. So that takes me into my next question. As all of us having these credentials, having these marks, what advice will we give somebody that is finishing their programs, that is, working in the field, that has this expertise and has this experience to say, listen, go get it. Go get it. Even when the industry is saying preferred, how do we sell it as required?
May I start there?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
And I say that because I'm an KM accrediting reviewer. So with that being said, in my travels, I've worked to review programs where in that particular community, that industry didn't require that. Therefore, the educators didn't push that. And then those students become complacent in just getting their education. So the question that I would pose to them, or the things that I try to get them to think about, is what if you chose to work outside of your hometown? Think about working outside of that or having a remote position where that is required. So I just think it really depends on your demographic, what those healthcare providers are looking for, but also pushing them to look outside of what they see in the here and now and think about what opportunities it could bring me.
Okay. Anybody else?
That's good. I like that. I like that. That's real good. Working with a KHIM accredited organization as well, it has been disheartening to learn, because when I came through programs, it was mandatory. After you complete this program, you're going to sit for this exam, period. You purchased it, bundled it together, all of the things. And so it's disheartening to me to learn that that's not the case anymore. However, I still push it. I said, what is the point of going through all of this if you don't walk away with something other than a degree? You have an opportunity to actually be a step above the degree. I understand in today's world, it may not be required in certain areas, but you need to be marketable. I'm always about being marketable. And that extra layer shows the marketability of you. And so I always encourage the students to go higher, aim higher, go get that certification.
Yep.
You- I always tell the nurses in my, because I mainly RNs, and I tell them, I said, according to these job descriptions, you don't have to do anything but just be an RN. But when you take this class and you get this certification, I let them know this is how you demonstrate what you know. And if you wait for beyond a certain amount of time, you're going to begin to forget. Guidelines are going to change, and it's going to be extremely much more difficult a year from now as opposed to 6 weeks from now.
Absolutely.
Because it's like starting over, because you got to learn
Exactly.
new stuff all over again.
So I always push them. And actually, honestly, Dr. J, I've had some of my former students, like, I pester them so much about taking tests, they don't even respond. They don't even answer my emails. Because I'm like, what are you doing?
So, Marjorie, how did you, and we work together, and I know that, encouraging those students to take that test, that was a huge part of not only getting them to take a test, but also open up a pipeline, because a lot of those students will go on and do their baccalaureate degree because of that fulfillment that came from them getting it. But we also had some that didn't. What was your method, being in your role at the time, of encouraging them to take it when the job said preferred and not required?
I reiterated, and it's true. And I was also just similar. I worked with a programmatic accreditor and all that good stuff. But the truth is that without certain kind of additional credentials, even if they're not required, you're going to hit a glass ceiling. Because you're going to come across something that is like a driving force and it's invisible and you can't get through it. And the certification is kind of like, again, I hate to talk about war and battle, but that's like my spear to get through. I'm like, I've got to fight this fight for my life, because it's my finances, it's my, my happiness. And to do that is you have to have the tools. You have to have the things that are going to get you to the next place. And so that's, kind of helping them understand that over time at the certification level, and they go out and try to get a job and they realize that the jobs that they want, that the money they want actually is an associate's degree, then they have to, I'm like, come on back, let's get this associate degree. Once they get the associate degree and they start working towards it and they start to see the benefits and like the entire healthcare system, and again, they start looking at the money and they start seeing, be like, I get that bachelor's, because that's the next glass ceiling. And
Absolutely.
forth and just say, here's a glass ceiling that you're going to have to get through, and here's the tools that you need in order to break that glass.
And I mean, as health information professionals, and even those that don't go through a formal program but can take, our coding certifications, take them, because again, not only does that assess individual competency, that shows that you do understand the basics of the profession. And that makes you extremely marketable. And it's not to say that you won't be able to get the jobs where, you can work. For instance, if you work for a hospital, they're implementing Epic, they want you to get Epic certification. But I can tell you, I had Epic certification. It was at RHIA that got me in the door, because implementing the HIM modules. HIM, RHIA, those two go together. So what I want people to understand is that the message is not get these letters and there's a guarantee. But I guarantee that if you get these letters, it's going to help you. So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you just have to change the way you frame it, because I don't ever want people to think, or students, whether they're emerging professionals or existing, that just because I have this, I'm going to automatically get something. It is, I have this, it's going to help me be more marketable and go along with the skills that are required to get something, because it's still about what you can do. But this indicates that not only can I do it, but I also have a elevated level of expertise.
Absolutely.
Now, does that mean that everybody that has it or that if you don't have it, you don't have the expertise? No, because I know some folks that don't have certifications that know a lot of stuff. My daddy has a GED. My mama got a PhD. My daddy knows some things that my mama doesn't know. Never saying that. What I'm saying is, my daddy has skills. That man can build anything. He built my cats a bunk bed. That wasn't about his credentials. That was about his skills. However, my mother, again, who has a PhD, she knows things. My mom was a nurse, but my mom is a phenomenal educator.
Mm-hmm.
Her,
Mm-hmm.
her impact was based on her skills. Yes, she's got some other credentials, but it was based on the skills, and those credentials were just indicative of those skills. So we gotta change the way we frame it. Like, get your letters, but make sure that you can tell them about your skills, because that is what's going to get you in the door.
A personal experience that I have is I'm also an entrepreneur in that, and again, that's something else I just fell into.
Mm-hmm.
But and I do auditing. I am able to get certain contracts based on the credentials that I have. For example, most of my peers have the CCS, while I have the CPC. So, when they're looking for an E&M auditor, they call me based on those particular credentials. And like I said, I'm able to incur different types of contracts based on that one skill in and of itself.
So
Mhm.
the credential gets you in, but the skills keep you in.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
So
that's your next T-shirt.
write it down. Let us get you in. Let us
Skills.
get you in. That skills keep you there.
Mm-hmm.
Skills keep you there. We gotta
Keep
find
you
something
in.
rhymes though. They don't really rhyme. That's a lot of words.
You said skills keep you in.
Right.
Right. But in and in, it's
You'll
in.
figure it out. You'll figure it
Yeah,
out.
I'll figure it out. I'll think about it later. It'll come to me about 2 o'clock in the morning. I'll figure it out. By the time we do the podcast in the morning, I'm listening to just I'm like, I got it. I got it. So I have a question for you specifically, Joan, and then of course I want to talk to my other educators. How do we incorporate into our curriculum those skills that they need to learn to be effective and to be marketable? How do we incorporate that to teach them how to do that stuff?
And I'm going to be honest with you, and you know how I feel about the curriculum now. But I think we have to push past the requirements of the curriculum. I really do. I know as accredited programs, we have to do this and this and this and that. However, and I think we're going to get there with the competency-based assignments that we're beginning to think about and build. But in the here and now, if you haven't done that already, how are we pushing those boundaries for those students to give them the above and beyond? Because as some of my students have shared with me, you can find an online program anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So how is your online program different from the next? What are you doing to push the envelope, push those boundaries for those students to gain those additional skills? And then for them to think about finding their niche. I mean, they have to figure something out. And I'm going to be honest with you, as I have been with my students. Um, Jasmine, I learned in school just like you did. It wasn't an option. This is what you learned in school, and then this is what you're going to do with what you learned in school.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it wasn't an option, but we're not teaching that generation of students anymore. So we as educators have to figure out how to push that envelope, how to get their juices to thinking about, how to get them thinking about something past that credential and the opportunities and the options that they want for themselves.
So, and that's a good point, because I'm gonna tell you, there was a lot of things that I learned in school that did not prepare me for what I experienced. There was nothing in not one of those chapters in that Huffman book that talked about
You know what I tell my students? Coding is not my favorite thing. It isn't. However, I learned, I am versed enough to, well enough to teach you as an instructor, but also to have the skills that I need in my private business, because that's what I do.
Yeah,
So
don't ask me to code nothing.
I can do it. But
Don't
is
don't
it my favorite thing in this profession? Mm-mm.
yeah, don't ask me to code. It's gonna be wrong. It's gonna be wrong.
I'm gonna get claim denied.
Right.
Don't ask me. So, Corey, so in your experience, how do you think, or what have you found to be the best ways to add those opportunities to develop those skills in the classroom to prepare them for what they can experience?
So to Joan's point regarding the changes in competencies, particularly around the KHIM accredited organization and changing their module into being able to show what you can do. Because it's one thing to be able to know it and take a test, but now we're at the point where you have to show that. And one thing I do in my courses, both the ones with the organization and the ones that I have for myself, is I think about and design um, uh, assignments that live outside of the box. So you have to be in tune with the industry and what is happening with the industry, because we all know that there are some educators that haven't been in the industry for decades, and all they know is what they get in that book. But you have to at least have conversations, or if you're not in the industry and still not a working professional, because sometimes you still need to be a working professional to be able to help those coming in.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
to understand what it is that they're going to run into when they get out into the working world. So creating things, and I like to tell them these projects are things that you can put on your resume, that you can say, I did this thing. And you have some tangible evidence of, this is what I did. I put together this report to show where our denials were and what was the root cause, and how, as a department, we can show that if we just looked at this or did this, then this will increase our numbers. So, putting together those type of projects, which are real world, which are things that are happening every day in health information departments, even around coding, even as not being a coder. But those types of projects are things that I encourage my students to think about. These, I know you get these assignments and I know you get all this, but these are things that are above and beyond. A lot of people are working from home. They're working remotely. You have to still be able to operate in a team. You still have to be able to operate in a group. So I create team assignments. Y'all need to work together. You need to learn how to talk to people. You need to know how to be able to work with people. And then I let them critique each other. How did this person do in relation to this particular project? Did they carry their weight? Did they do what they supposed to do? Were they timely with their assignments? So that affords them the opportunity to be able to do that type of work as well. You have to be able to think and problem solve and do those things. Those are marketable skills, even outside of our profession. Those are marketable skills that you got to bring to the table in this game in order to be looked at and to be considered. And so I try to, put together those types of assignments and projects that allow them to build not only on the health information skills, but also some of the soft skills and other skills that are necessary to be successful in our profession.
Awesome. That's a really great point. You gotta be able to use those skills and put those skills on your resume.
Absolutely.
Yes, I have this question for you now, but I'm gonna put a spin on it for you. Nurses are clinical. They
Yes.
have their clinical mindset and how they do it. However, one of the rules that we have as coders, you can't lead a doctor. How do you integrate real world experiences and get them to turn off their clinical and look at it as a coder and not a nurse?
That is an excellent question because what they usually do in the first couple of weeks is they go with, well, I think this is how it should be done. And I tell them as a coder, your job is to code what is documented to the highest level of specificity, not what you think. And
Now,
it takes them time to get it. It does. And also wanted to like I was also a tutor for a KHEM program here in Philadelphia. And honestly, what I really thought about the program was I felt as though the assignments were too easy and they weren't reflective of what it was, what you go through in the real world. And when I created my program, I had totally different questions, totally different scenarios
Mhm.
that I would give my students. And matter of fact, I'll just share quickly. One of my students had a friend, she's a nurse, she had a friend who had just finished up her RHIA program. So in week 2, we do the cardiovascular system. So she showed her some of the practice questions and the scenarios that I gave her that she was assigned. So her friend who had just finished his RHIA program said to her, "Oh, well, he has you all at the deep end. I didn't get to this till the very end of my program. That's a problem.
That's a problem.
You're supposed to know how to do this when you have finished a KHEM accredited program. You should know how to break down a chart, a case, know why were they being seen, where were they being seen, what secondary diagnoses they have, what was the principal or primary diagnosis, and how does all this relate to coding wise? Are there any causal relationships? Are there any combination codes that you should know how to do coming out of any program, RHIT or RHIA?
That's right.
and so that's, you know, I think that's a perfect example of adding those real world experiences.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when I tell you scenario based learning, competency based education, those are my two things. I want you to be able to do it, apply those concepts and theories. Because, like I said, you can read it in a book, but if you get faced with a scenario that is outside of what's in that chapter, that knowledge check at the end of your chapter, can you apply what you learned in that chapter to what's going on now? Because,
And
like, what happened in New Orleans, where they had the attack, they,
Mhm.
that's when your trauma registry brain needs to pop up. You got
Mhm.
people. Everybody ain't from New Orleans. How are
Mhm.
you going to gather data about the people that lived?
Mhm.
Where are they from? Were they treated? What was the outcome? Can you follow them? What are all the fields that need to go in that trauma registry for you to keep up? And then what
Mhm.
about data visualization? What are the age groups? What are the ethnicities? What was the injury? Look, all of these things. That's stuff that you learn putting together what's going on right now and what you learn in that book. Doing an exercise in that book is great, but it is that skill that's going to help you, and it's also going to help you when it comes to cognitive thinking on your tests,
Mm-hmm.
because your test is based on cognitive function, how you can process it and how you think about it. That's why it's important.
Yep.
All right, just I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
mhm. No, that was it. Like I really just, you know, work with that because nurses have a whole different way of like we have a whole nursing process that they drill in us, and it only works for nursing. It doesn't work outside. But I also, in defense of nurses, the reason why nurses are so defensive is because they drill in you the last step of the nursing process is the rationale. Why do you do what you do? That's why they have so many questions. Like it has to make sense. Why do you do this? And honestly, and I can tell you, when I was in cosmetology school, that's what got me messed up, the rationale, because they don't take it that far. But I had to
Mm.
read in the book why you have it, why you hold it at this angle because it affects the curl this way. I just had to take it a step further for me, but it's all in how we're trained to think.
Right, and that is what
I
matters.
think that's the key point, trying to think.
How
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and that is what goes back into why does your skills matters, and how does that, having those skills and those certifications help you chart your path,
Yes.
Mhm.
because that's what it is. So in our big picture reflection as we get ready to close, give me your key takeaway. Marjorie, I'm going to start with you. What is your key takeaway and final thought about the importance of credentials in helping to chart your path?
Okay, so I think credentials are kind of like makeup. They come in all sorts of shapes, sizes, colors, flavors, but ultimately they should enhance your appeal to others. And Jesse, I'd love to see you with some shiny lip gloss sometime.
Oh,
You don't have to have colors. Just a little shine. Just
oh God.
And you know what? And Marjorie, you're exactly right, because when you're on television, everybody has on gloss, whether people believe it or not.
Mhm.
Everybody. Even then, everybody.
put your credentialing gloss on.
I love
Put on
that.
your credentialing
I like
gloss.
that.
Let me write that
I
down.
like that.
T-shirt.
T-shirt. Put on your credentialing gloss. Or we can, or you know what? We can just say credentialing gloss, and then the gloss have like letters on it, like super cute.
Okay.
I like it. I like it. Jesse, what are your takeaways?
My takeaways is I just share my experience. I mean, honestly, HIM changed my life. It really did. And it is, there's room for everybody. There is a place for everybody.
Mhm.
I might not like auditing. Somebody else may love auditing. I might not like compliance. Somebody may love compliance. I might not like health and like policy and procedure. Some people may love that. There is enough room for everybody. You just have to gain as much information. I always tell everybody before they sign up for my class, do your research. I tell them, I give them a few things. I'm like, look into it, and then when you're ready, contact me back. Because I'm not trying to just take your money. I'm not. I want you to be able to get something from it and get what you expect from it. And have it do what you want it to do. If you want it to change your life, it can. If you want to go in this direction, you can. I can tell you how to do that. So for me, my takeaway is just it's a big table. There's room for everybody. Just
All
find
right.
your place.
I like that. All right, Clarice.
Y'all take all the good stuff. I'm always about your marketability. I believe that in this day and age, there's if you pay attention to social media, particularly around our profession, you'll see that there are thousands of folks that are all kind of at the same level. And you need to find the way to rise above all of that.
Mhm.
One way is to make sure that your skills outshine some of these other folks. Your certifications that you are getting, making sure that you didn't just take a certification exam and pass it, but you also have the skill and the knowledge to back that up. Um, like I think Joan said it, and I think Jesse said it as well. Critical thinking. You got to think outside the box. You got to be able
Mhm.
to take what someone gives you and look at it maybe sideways to be like, well, you know what? I never thought about it that way. You got to look at
Mhm.
all vantage points in order to be successful in showing and proving that you have that particular skill. And then I'm always about the why. Why do we? And I'll talk specifically to medical coding because there's always a why. So you have guidelines that kind of show you and tell you how you need to do things and how to put things together. But there's always a why. So there's regulations that tell you the why of why you need to follow this guideline and code it this way. Be in the know about that. That in and of itself, because people don't talk about those regulations. People don't talk about the information that is provided to you. You know, your managers and maybe some of your C-suite people may know some of that. But you, as the person doing the job, you need to know that too. And that again adds to your marketability. So I'm all about being marketable. You got to be marketable in this space.
That's right. That's good. Joan.
I think I'm going to just being marketable, knowing and being confident in what you bring to the table. Know your worth, know your level of expertise.
Yes.
And again, I can help you get there, but it's something that you have to bring to the table to continue on that journey.
Mm.
And even in all of us on this panel, all of us have brought personal experiences that, we've shared with others as to how we got to this particular table. Well, I think we should do the same thing with our students. Just share. And as for when it comes to, my students and being in the classroom, I'm an open book as to the good, the bad, the ugly. And just be realistic about some of the challenges that they may have. I mean, it's not all six figures. And even if and when you get to those six figures, the challenge is there. But the real story about getting your foot in the door, the real story about you making yourself shine, the real story behind um, being at the table and the challenges when you're at that table. And just giving the students the real story behind everything, and then letting them make their choices. But at the end of the day, encouraging them to market themselves at the same time that they challenge themselves to gain these necessary skills to continue on these journeys.
My key takeaway is this: when it comes to finding your place, charting your path, don't lead with your letters, lead with your life. Look at the skills that you developed over your lifetime and how it can be applied to what you're doing. The letters will come. Those credentials, they'll come. But what is it that you've done over your life, whether as a student or whether just a everyday person?
Mhm.
I learned project management raising a kid.
That's
I
right.
learned product development, trying to create products in here in the house in my several entrepreneurial pursuits. I learned compliance, having to stay within the laws and the confines of the Methodist Church when I really wanted to do what I wanted to do. So, everything that I learned in my life is kind of what helped me to determine
Mhm.
my path. So don't leave with your letters, leave with your life. The letters will come.
I love
Love
that.
it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Charting your path. All right, we are over time. However, does anybody have any questions? I haven't seen anything. I do see some familiar faces. I see Treyana Whiting. She is our director of health informatics. She is a nurse. You know Treyana Jesse, and
Yeah.
she's a clinical and nursing informatics guru, and she is on our staff. Thank you so much for supporting us tonight. And then we see Fantasia O'Neill, who is one of Joan Wilder's students, well, former students, who has finished the program. Thank you so much for joining. And then DW, I think, came in to see uh, Clarice and Jesse. So thank you all for coming to join us on tonight. So thank you all for ending your week on a high note. Next week, we will talk about a skills-based job search. Again, how can you find what you need using your skills and not just focusing on just that singular siloed approach? Thank you so much. Y'all have a wonderful evening.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
the opportunity.